I don't come to bow, you know, I come to conquer. I don't come to bow, I come to conquer.
Is this love, is this love, is this love, is this love that I'm feeling?
Thank you very much, brothers and sisters. Rastafari live, you know. As Bob would say, there's a natural mystic that's flowing through the air.
We all know the legendary Bob Marley, right? Gen Zs, I'm looking at you, right? The reggae king, the king of Jamaica, famous way beyond his Jamaican shores. He sadly passed away in a Miami hospital after a long battle with cancer. But wait, there's more to the story. Bob was famous for being all about spirituality and fighting against capitalism, but guess this, since he passed away, his image and music have been used for all sorts of merch. It's kind of ironic, right? The guy who stood against global capitalism is now a big brand himself. This has got a lot of people questioning if this whole commercialization thing is going against what he stood for. So what's that about? And what does his family has to say about it? Bob was huge in the music world. Although that goes without saying, his songs were and still are anthems for freedom and change. But behind those contagious songs on those catchy there's some major mystery about his death. Fans were heartbroken, and there are still so many unanswered questions, like why was his health such a big secret?
Singer Bob Marley, his reggae music known far beyond its roots in Jamaica, died in a Miami hospital today after a long battle against cancer.
The official word is he died of cancer in 1981, but some people think there's more to it. Some wild theories say the CIA took him out because of his political influence in Jamaica. Others claim a rival cursed him, causing his cancer. And here's the craziest one. Some folks believe he didn't die at all and is living in hiding somewhere. Crazy, right? We're all left wondering what the real deal is, what truths will come out, and what legacy will Bob Marley truly leave behind. Stay tuned as we dig into the secrets they never told you about the death of Bob Marley.
Is this love, is this love, is this love, is this love that I'm feeling?
Honestly, it's really hard to talk about Bob without making him sound like a complete angel. Well, except you're talking about his rumored sex-capades. I mean, the dude still has children popping up, and even that's legendary in some circles. Besides that, you can't talk about him without making him sound like the protagonist in a kindergarten storybook. He didn't just play reggae, he was reggae. From the streets of Kingston, Jamaica, where he formed the Wailers. His music was all about his life, his Rastafarian beliefs, and what was going down in Jamaica. Bob had a knack for lyrics, mixing deep messages with contagious rhythms. He'd sing about love, struggle, and freedom, all while jamming to universal that spoke to everyone. I mean, classics like One Love, Redemption Song, and No Woman, No Cry became the anthems of change for people everywhere. Bob was more than just a musician. He was a movement. His influence went beyond music. He actually lived his words, shaking up culture and politics. Sticking to his roots and spreading a message of unity, Bob made reggae a global thing, a voice for the oppressed, and a symbol of resistance and empowerment. Bob Marley was reggae, and because of him, reggae became a beacon of hope and a rallying cry. His pioneering spirit and passion made it all happen. His legacy lives on, with his music continuing to inspire and bring people together everywhere.
So for a long time, things were kind of lean.
Well, yes, thing was kind of lean as can. It leaves to what is your expectation and your do, you know?
Early life Bob Marley was born on February 6, 1945, at his grandpa's farm in 9 Mile, Jamaica. His parents were Norval Sinclair Marley, a white Jamaican, and Cedella Malcolm, an Afro-Jamaican. Norval, aka Captain, though he was just a private in the British Army, was 64 when Bob was born and didn't stick around much, providing little support before passing away when Bob was 10. This guy was a walking United Nations. There's a fun fact about Bob's name. Apparently, his birth name was Nesta Robert Marley, but a passport official thought Nesta sounded too girly and switched it to Robert Nesta Marley. Also, despite some rumors, Bob's biographer says the Marley name has no Syrian Jewish origin. Bob's grandpa Omariah, who was a Mile, a kind of spiritual leader, was one of his first musical influences. Bob started jamming with his buddy Neville Livingston, aka Bunny Wailer, while they were at Stepney Primary and Junior High School in 9 Mile. When Bob was 12, he and his mom moved to Trenchtown in Kingston. Bob's mom and Bunny Wailer's dad had a daughter together, so Bob and Bunny were basically stepbrothers. Living together in Trenchtown, they got deeper into music, exploring ska and the latest R&B from U.S. radio stations. Bob, Bunny, and Peter Tosh formed a vocal group that went through a bunch of names like the Teenagers, the Wailing Rude Boys, the Wailing Wailers, and finally, just the Wailers. They didn't play instruments at first and focused on vocal harmonies. Joe Higgs, a neighbor and successful singer, mentored them and taught Bob guitar. Later on, Bob's mom married Edward Booker, a U.S. civil servant, giving Bob two half-brothers, Richard and Anthony. And the rest, as they say, is history. Bob Marley grew up in the chill mountain community of 9 Miles in St. Ann Parish, Jamaica. As a young dude, he made his way to Kingston, where he really came into his own. Fans know he often sings about Trenchtown, but the real story behind the name might shock you. This area was a mix of low-income government buildings and burnt-out squatter homes, literally built on top of a sewage trench. Yup, you read that right.
Reggae music was born in the poverty and filth of the slums of Kingston, Jamaica in the 1960s. And over the past decade, it's become the rallying cry of the not-so-beautiful Jamaicans.
Trenchtown was full of street toughs, known as rude boys. Bob didn't consider himself one of them, but he could definitely hold his own in a fight. His street fighting skills earned him the nickname Tough Gong, a name that stuck with him for life. I'd have gone with Pretty Tough or something, but that's just me. Get it? 'Cause he was so pretty. Later on, he named his record label Tough Gong, which helped take reggae music global. One of the best shout-outs to his Trenchtown days is in his classic 1974 hit No Woman No Cry, where he sings, "I remember when we used to sit in the government yard in Trenchtown, observing the hypocrites, mingle with the good people we meet." Those lines give us a peek into his early life and the mix of people he grew up with. Career. Back in February 1962, young Bob Marley hit up Federal Studios and recorded 4 tracks: Judge Not, One Cup of Coffee, Do You Still Love Me, and Terror, with local producer Leslie Kong. 3 of these jams were dropped on Beverly's label, with One Cup of Coffee released under the name Bobby Martell. Talk about a secret identity. In 1963, Bob, Bunny Wailer, Peter Tosh, Junior Braithwaite, Beverly Kelso, and Cherry Smith started out as the Teenagers. They quickly rebranded to the Wailing Rude Boys, then the Wailing Wailers, and finally just the Wailers after being discovered by producer Coxsone Dodd. Their track Simmer Down became a Jamaican #1 hit in February 1964, selling around 70,000 copies. Not too shabby, huh? The Wailers were on fire, recording with top Jamaican musicians like Ernest Ranglin, Jackie Mittoo, and Roland Alfonso at Studio One. By 1966, it was just the power trio, Bob, Bunny, and Peter Tosh. In '66, Bob tied the knot with Rita Anderson and moved to Wilmington, Delaware to be near his mom. During his time in the U.S., he worked various jobs, including as a lab assistant and a forklift operator under the alias Donald Marley. Some say it was for a few months, others for several years. Not many of his neighbors knew he was already a bit of a big deal back in Jamaica. That includes Ibis and Jenny Pitts, who became friends with Bob and Rita after Rita visited their gift shop. Ibis Pitts, a drummer, used to jam with Bob and got hooked on the Wailers after Rita gave him a 7-inch record. When Bob's visa expired, Pitts even went with him to Jamaica and was blown away by the crowd of fans, footballers, and Wailers following Bob around. It was like Jesus with his disciples, he said. Fast forward to 1984, years after Bob's passing, and the Pitts family started a music festival in his honor, the People's Festival for Peace. It still happens every year in Wilmington, Delaware, keeping Bob's spirit and legacy alive. Raised Catholic, Bob got super into Rastafari beliefs in the 60s, especially once he was out of his mom's influence. After returning to Jamaica, he officially converted to Rastafari and started growing those iconic dreadlocks. And that's how the legend began. After some money drama with producer Coxsone Dodd, Bob Marley and his crew teamed up with the legendary Lee Scratch Perry and his studio band, the Upsetters. This epic collab didn't last long. less than a year, but it produced some of the Wailers' best tracks ever. Even though Marley and Perry split over recording rights, they kept working together on and off. In 1969, Jamaican music evolved again with a new slow and steady rhythm, first heard in the Maytals' song, Do the Reggae. Bob teamed up with producer Leslie Kong, a big name in reggae, and recorded with his studio band, Beverly's All-Stars. This session marked the Wailers' first dive into the new reggae style, ditching the old ska trumpets for electric guitar breaks. They recorded hits like Soul Shakedown Party, Stop That Train, and Do It Twice, which would be released as The Best of the Wailers. Between 1968 and 1972, Bob, Rita Marley, Peter Tosh, and Bunny Wailer re-recorded some tracks with JAD Records in Kingston and London, trying to make the Wailers sound more commercial. Bunny later said those songs were just demos and shouldn't have been released as an album. In 1968, Bob and Rita visited songwriter Jimmy Norman in the Bronx for a 3-day jam session, resulting in a rare 24-minute tape with a pop influence, aimed at breaking into the U.S. charts. Bob even experimented with doo-wop on Stay With Me and 60s love song vibes on Splish for My Splash. Enter Scratch. Lee Scratch. Perry played a huge role in Bob Marley and the Wailers' rise to fame. He produced their album Soul Rebels, their first LP released outside Jamaica, and helped them nail their signature sound by bringing in the legendary rhythm section, drummer Carlton Barrett and his brother, bassist Aston Family Man Barrett. This collab definitely got them more recognition, but it didn't exactly fill their wallets. According to Bunny Wailer, Perry was busy lining his own pockets instead. In a 2010 Rolling Stone interview, Bunny Wailer didn't hold back. Lee Perry did nothing for the Wailers. He just sat there in the studio while we played our music, and then he screwed us, he said. We never saw a dime from those albums we did with him. Records that other people have made millions from. I never forgave him. Ouch. That's Perry had a different take, of course. In a 2017 chat with Afropop Worldwide, he said Wailer was just bitter and holding a grudge for some unknown reason. But Marley and the Wailers made their feelings crystal clear in their 1973 tune, Trenchtown Rock, with lyrics that seemed to reference Perry, "You reap what you sow, and everyone know now, don't turn your back." By 1972, Marley was still trying to make a name for himself outside Jamaica, living in Ridgemount Gardens, Bloomsbury. His journey from Trenchtown to the world stage was just getting started. In the early 70s, Bob signed with CBS Records in London and hit the UK tour circuit with soul singer Johnny Nash. While in London, the Wailers got their road manager, Brent Clark, to set up a meeting with Chris Blackwell from Island Records. They wanted to talk royalties, but instead, they walked away with a $4,000 advance to record an album. Talk about a plot twist. The story goes that Bob was strumming his guitar at a party in Kingston when he got roped in by two Americans, manager Danny Sims and his client, soul singer Johnny Nash. They wanted to add some island vibes to Nash's new tracks and thought Marley was the guy for the job. The plan? Marley and the Wailers would head to London to help Nash write songs, open some of his shows, and maybe even snag a deal with CBS Records. Sounds like a dream, right? Well, it ended up working out a lot better for Nash than for Marley. Nash recorded a few of Marley's songs, including the future classic Stir It Up, and even scored a massive hit with I Can See Clearly Now. But Marley soon got fed up with the whole scene. In his book, Before the Legend, The Rise of Bob Marley, Christopher Farley quotes Marley saying, "He's a nice guy, but he doesn't know what reggae is. Johnny Nash is not Rasta, and if you're not a Rasta, you don't know nothing about reggae."
If you ask plenty musicians, them know it, but them can't do it. So people still searching for this truth here, with this reggae music. And
things took a turn for the worse when CBS Records pushed the Wailers to record the almost novelty track, Reggae on Broadway, and then didn't bother promoting it. Frustrated, Marley and the Wailers cut ties with the label. Island Records had just lost their top reggae star, Jimmy Cliff, and Blackwell was on the hunt for a new face to capture the rock audience. When Bob walked in, Blackwell saw exactly what he needed, a rebel vibe that could bridge rock and Jamaican music. Bob was the image, Blackwell said. After things went south with CBS, they were desperate to get back to Jamaica. But instead of just a ride home, they stumbled upon their golden ticket to global fame. In his memoir, Islander: My Life in Music and Beyond, Island Records founder Chris Blackwell spills the tea on his first meeting with the group, who just showed up at his office one day via Rolling Stone. Island had been distributing some of the Wailers' records in the UK, and Bunny Wailer thought Blackwell owed them money. But when they walked in, they didn't look like broke losers. They oozed confidence and power. And as luck would have it, like I said before, Jimmy Cliff had just left Island Records, and even though US radio stations weren't feeling reggae, yet Blackwell knew he could make the Wailers a hit with college kids. By the end of their chat, he agreed to give them $4,000 to make an album, without even getting them to sign a contract. A few months later, Blackwell went down to Jamaica to check out what they'd cooked up, and was absolutely blown away by the rough tracks that would become Catch a Fire, the Wailers' breakthrough album.
This is my identity. I don't come to bow, I come to conquer. I don't come to bow, I come to conquer.
Personal life: Bob Marley's mission to make the world a better place, and his deep connection to the Rastafarian faith were a match made in heaven. But sadly, his religious beliefs also played a role in the health decisions that might have cost him his life. The whole ordeal started in the late 70s, when what seemed like a harmless toe injury turned out to be something much more sinister. Marley, a huge football, or soccer for the American crew, fan, brushed off the issue as a typical sports injury, but it was actually melanoma. Doctors suggested amputating the toe, but Marley's faith made that a no-go. Instead, he opted for a skin graft, which unfortunately wasn't enough. By the time the cancer's true extent was revealed, just after his iconic Madison Square Garden shows, it had spread throughout his body. Marley then chose alternative treatments over aggressive medical care, focusing mainly on diet changes under the guidance of a German doctor. Sadly, after 8 months without improvement, he was headed back to Jamaica when his condition took a turn mid-flight. He was rushed to a hospital in Miami, where he passed away on May 11th, 1981.
Wow, thank you very much, brothers and sisters. Rastafari live, As Bob would say, there's a natural mystic that's flowing through the air.
Post-death, all right. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. Bob Marley's posthumous journey from rebel icon to commercial juggernaut. It's a wild ride. First off, let's address the accusation of selling out. Back in the day, being called a sellout could seriously damage an artist's street cred. But nowadays, with sponsorships and licensing deals keeping artists afloat, it's lost some of its sting. Still, for someone like Marley, whose music was all about liberation and anti-capitalism, it's a bit of a head-scratcher. Now, on to the money stuff. In 2023, Forbes ranked Marley as the 9th highest-paid dead celeb, right behind John Lennon. Yep, you heard that right. Marley's estate raked in millions. But here's where things get interesting. Marley's family controls his business affairs now, and they've struck deals left and right with merchandisers and marketers. It's like Bob Marley Inc. out here. And the big money spinner? His Legend album, of course. It sold millions of copies, spent ages on the charts, and even got a remix album. What about the political stuff? Turns out, Legend conveniently skips over Marley's more revolutionary tracks. Instead, it focuses on the lovey-dovey peace and happiness side of things. Not exactly the fiery rebel image those of us that actually listen to him know and love. And let's not forget the merch. You name it, there's probably a Bob Marley version of it. From coffee to skateboards, his face is everywhere. It's like the Disneyfication of Bob Marley. Even his own cannabis brand, Marley Natural, is backed by big bucks and corporate logos. What do you think? Do you approve? Anyway, as we try to make sense of Bob Marley's fame after his passing, let's not lose sight of what really mattered to him. One love, one heart, let's get together and feel all right. His soul lives on in the songs, the lyrics, and the countless lives he touched.